your grapes, that's where you're going to be treading them. It's so good to have an older group. Any of you ever see Lucy? Remember that's a show. It's so good to have an older group. Okay, and she's treading, okay? She's treading exactly where they pick them, because they're not like our olives, which you can actually schlep, or our wheat that you can put down on the backs of the donkeys and take to the threshing floor. These need to be done pronto. So when they're ripe, they're only ripe less than a month out of the year, usually 2 weeks, and then you're finished. You got to tread. You don't want half the juice coming out and trailing behind you on the donkey. So you pick them, you carve out a space in the limestone of the Judean hills. Remember, what's the bracha Yehuda gets? What's the bracha Yehuda gets that has to do with the...
I don't know.
Right? And his eyes will be bloodshot because there'll be so many grapes. Do you remember that?
Yeah.
Because the mountains of Judea are filled with grapes. Okay? And they're immediately carving out of the limestone in the terraced areas. They're carving them out. If you go today in the hills of Jerusalem, you will find non-stop ancient squares carved out. Those ancient squares that you'll find are basins that were used to tread and make wine. They're there today. You just got to sweep them up a bit and you're going to find them wherever you step. It's the Navim coming alive. Just walk in the hills and you'll hear them talking to you. So if you have Mashal HaKerem, they all understood what it meant. How many verbs are in Mashal HaKerem that have to do with what you need to do before you get that wine? Tell me.
Gather.
Okay, you see the word gather.
Gathered up.
Okay, I'm looking at Pasuk 2.
You're in Micha or in Shai?
Right. Okay. Under the word grapes, I apologize. There's a pasuk from Micha, and right after that it goes into Isaiah. So what is Isaiah telling us that they're doing first? In Hebrew, Vayezkehu. What does that mean? Read your translations.
Move the stones.
Excellent. Vayesalkehu. Tell me again. Repeat that again out loud.
He gathered stones.
He gathered stones, and he gathered stones. What's our number one crop in Israel? Stones. You can go to the same field 1 year after you cleared it out perfectly, and I'm telling you the truth, they just pop up all over again. So before you even start thinking about planting in a field or even putting down seeds, you have to clear the fields from the stones. Yes.
That part of, because most of it is done on terraces, and then with the rain,
they're constantly falling, but also truthfully, I believe that there's little elves that come out at night and they put them back again. Oh, okay.
Yes, they also grow ancient villages that spring up from
There you go. There you go. Okay, v'yisakehu, v'yisalkehu, v'yita'ehu. Okay, so this is all before we even start doing anything. Vayiven migdal. Why do we need a migdal? Why do we need a tower?
to watch.
Exactly. Why do we have to watch over our grapes? Because like it's a boiled water never boils if you're watching it, right? So why are we putting up watchtowers in our vineyards?
the animals, birds.
Not animals, not birds. Thieves. Okay? By the time summer comes in Israel, we have no more water left in our cisterns. Our grape juice, our wine becomes our living sustenance. It's very valuable. Okay, the people live in these watchtowers. Whole families, like I said, they're going out for 2 weeks out of the year. They're gathering in the grapes. They're treading them and making juice. They're putting them in the bottom part of these watchtowers. Till today, have you ever been out to Efrat? When you're going out to Efrat, when you go through the tunnel, look on the right-hand side and you will actually see watchtowers that theoretically are going back to the time of Yeshayahu, of Yirmiyahu. Why do I say that? Because they're just rebuilt again every single year. No one's going out and importing Swedish stones. Because I'm making an oxymoron. There's no stones to import from Sweden. You don't need them. You have rocks in Israel. You're going to use the same rocks your great-great-great-great-grandparents used, and you're going to rebuild that watchtower. And it's 2 stories. They're sleeping on the upper story because it's like automatic air conditioning. But the bottom is being used for those jugs of juice. Okay? And again, I'm sorry if I'm going off a bit, but the jugs of juice is another mashal that we have. What do we know about the mashal? Where do we store our grape juice to become good wine? In silver containers or in authentic ceramics, pottery? Okay, and we all remember the story about the Roman princess who says to this incredibly ugly rabbi, why did God put your great wisdom inside such an ugly jar? And he'd said to her, bring me your wine, we'll store some in silver, and we'll store some in that, and what was stored in silver became rotten. Okay, so again, we're storing which is a mashal, right? About that the most beautiful brains are inside the ugliest bodies. But again, you understood that. Why? Because you've been storing all of your grape juice in pottery, correct? Okay, so we're going back and we have this watchtower. So for those 2 weeks, we are out in the fields, making sure no one's stealing, needing to be on 24/6. We're doing what's mishmarot, shift work. Okay, that's when they're all what?
Night watchman.
Night watchmen, but during the time they're all treading to making it into wine, to making it to grape juice. They can't spare a moment, so they sleep in shifts. And the time that they're treading, they also have their friends coming and cheerleading them on. And the cheer we know in ancient Hebrew is what? Hey Dad, very good. And how did you know that?
Because you told us.
Oh, wise one who listens to me. If I leave this alone, I leave the mashal alone because again, it's going on with a million different verbs about how they need to plant and they need to take care of everything, but they don't follow Hashem's ways. And what happens? You get sour grapes. You've heard the expression sour grapes? That's what happens here. Is actually we have sour grapes. So I'm not going to go into all of this, but read it at home and understand that they understood that every single step of the way, every single stage in the creating from a rocky field to superb award-winning wine is many efforts are involved here. And if you don't follow every step perfectly, you're not going to get good wine. And again, Yeshayahu's using this as a mashal to describe what's going on. Okay? Hashem is calling us. We're his vine. We're his people. And yet what happens if we don't do things properly? There you go. So I want to jump ahead for a second because I'm on a roll here. Get back to the great page. What page is my great page? 4. Thank you. Let's see if I gave it to you guys. Okay. Brought forth wild grapes, and then the people of Jerusalem find. Okay, so I want you to go to Isaiah 16, 16 verse 10. 16 verse 10, and then we're going to leave these people because I know you all want to sit down. 16 verse 10, what does it say?
Gladness is taken away, joy out of the fruitful field.
Go on.
Oh, and in the vineyards there shall be no singing, neither joyful noise. No treader shall tread out wine in the presses. I have made the vintage shout to cease.
I have made the vintage shout to cease. Why were they shouting when they were making the vintage? To encourage each other. They're exhausted. They're all on a sugar high. They're drinking, seriously, they're drinking grape juice nonstop because they have to get it into those clay containers before it starts to ferment before the right time.
No, but maybe they're encouraging the grapes instead of shaming
Yeah.
See that? My student has excelled. Baruch Hashem. Okay? So what I want you to look here is when Yeshayahu is talking about the opposite of this happening, and destruction will happen. There will be no more grapes being made into wine. He says, no more will the sound of Hadad resonate in the hills. It says, Kitzrech Hadad Nafal. Hadad was the shouting that they did to encourage each other. And if you try to tread inside an ancient wine press and you have people around you going, hey, Dad, hey, Dad, hey, Dad, it's incredibly encouraging. And that's what I want you to remember. This is the sounds that were echoing out during the time of Tu B'Av. So we're going to leave these nice people. They've been doing, they've put up with us very well. We're going to leave them alone now.
Seem like they're getting along just fine.
There you go, see that?